I hope you're still getting where we're heading. Uh, Sometimes when you read philosophy, it's very, sometimes I myself, I'm not sure where we're get going, but I'm trying. I bought this one before during the pandemic, but I never got to use it. But maybe I can now use it. But ayaw na, mukhang nalobat na yung battery. Tagal ko kasing hindi ginamit eh. Anyway, tama na kasi ang dumi pala ng room ko. My pillows are there, my motorcycle helmet is there, and other things are there. So, sorry for that. So I'll just start sharing. And let's talk about the material substratum according to um, matter as the substratum of sensible realities. No? Matter as the substratum of sensibles even. So the concept of matter, despite Berkeley's criticisms, has been attractive to many philosophers. Hylas says much to explain why material substance as the substratum of sensible things has a very powerful appeal. Uh, One popular argument for the existence of mind-independent matter depends on the assumption that sensible things would exist even if there happened to exist no minds to perceive them, and that they continue to exist even when no one is actually perceiving them. We do not ordinarily imagine that physical objects pop in and out of existence depending on whether or not someone is there to perceive them. Perception is the method by which we learn about the properties of sensible things. But we do not ordinarily imagine that perception brings sensible things into existence and can cause them to disappear when they are not being perceived. Berkeley eventually wants to explain this expectation as a natural consequence of our limitation to immediate experience of our own finite human minds. If God exists, and this is precisely what Berkeley, through Philoneus, proposes to prove, then sensible things, even in the most remote parts of the physical universe, where human minds will never travel to perceive them, and at times when human minds only intermittently perceive them, are completely and continuously perceived by the infinite mind of God. Let's look at this quote. I colored it pink for for you. I acknowledge Philoneus, and it's on page 133, that upon a fair observation of what passes in my mind, I can discover nothing else but that I am a thinking being, affected with variety of sensations. Neither is it possible to conceive how a sensation should exist in an unperceiving substance. But then, on the other hand, when I look on sensible things in a different view, considering them as so many modes and qualities, I find it necessary to suppose a material substratum without which they cannot be conceived to exist. Philoneus replies, material substratum call you it. Pray, by which of your senses came you acquainted with that being? How did you know? Where did you get that material substratum? And then he says, it is not itself sensible, its modes and qualities only being perceived by the senses. And Philoneus says, I presume then it was by reflection and reason you obtained the idea of it. And Hylas would say, I do not pretend of any other, and I do not pretend to any proper positive idea of it. However, I conclude it exists because qualities cannot be conceived to exist without a support. Later, of course, Hylas would elaborate on the concept of material substratum as the insensible metaphysical platform supporting sensible qualities. Philoneus presses Hylas for a further explanation of the concept, and Hylas retreats to the implication of the terminology, suggesting that a material substratum must be spread beneath or underlie the sensible qualities of sensible things. I think I colored it blue for you. Is it not sufficiently expressed in the term substratum or substance? If so, the word substance, substratum, should import that it is spread under the sensible qualities or accidents. So there's a foundation, there's a base, diba? True, says Hylas. And consequently, under extension. I own it. And then Philoneus would say, it is therefore somewhat in its own nature entirely distinct from extension. It is not hard for Philoneus to persuade Hylas that the position is absurd. If material substance or substratum is entirely distinct from extension, then it cannot literally be true that material substratum is spread beneath or underlies sensible qualities in anything, like the way one physical thing can be placed under another. The metaphor is that of a material substratum, no? Parang bedsheet, parang it's something that underlies being spread, no? Parang palaman if you buy a peanut butter, you have to spread it, no? Underneath the sensible properties of things experienced in sensation. Matter thereby lends sensible quality support as a kind of surface to which they may attach. The concept of something being spread under another thing, however, is one that is derived from sense experience, where we see or feel a sensible thing, such as peanut butter being spread on a piece of bread, or in turn, spread under a layer of jam. Material substance as a substratum for all perceivable properties, on the contrary, must itself be totally insensible and imperceivable. It is unclear, as Philoneus observes, whether we can think of matter as a substratum in anything like the sense of a platform, or substance to which sensible qualities of things adhere. Another important role that the concept of matter is supposed to play in a materialist metaphysics is as a unifying foundation for sensible properties. The problem that materialism hopes to solve in this way is that of accounting for the fact that the ideas we associate with particular sensible things must somehow be bound together as the sensible properties of a single sensible entity. Consider again the example of an apple. The apple, we say, is red, sweet, aromatic, waxy, and firm, and crunchy sounding. What makes all of these sensible properties of the same sensible thing? What ties them together? We experience them as distinct categories of sensible qualities, and there's no necessary connection, it would seem, between color, taste, smell, texture, or sound. We nevertheless believe that that they are all properties of the same apple, and we think of an apple as a unified entity that possesses all of these among other sensible properties. But what philosophical principles can be adduced to justify belief in the unity and integrity of a single apple? How do I know when I see the apple's color and taste its flavor that I am experiencing properties of the same thing? What, if anything, is the connection between an apple's color and its flavor or any of its other sensible properties? What justifies us in believing that all of these properties belong together as properties of one and the same object? Materialists answer that question by saying, as Philonous gets Hylas to admit, that a material-based substratum underlies the sensible properties of sensible things. The materialist explanation of why the several properties of the apple all belong together as properties of the same thing is by allowing that all the sensible properties literally attach to the same underlying substratum or material base. The concept of a material substratum, in turn, is that of an insensible and for that reason entirely mind-independent foundation or support for the sensible properties that we experience in sensation. A sensible thing, such as the apple, according to materialism, is not merely an integrated assemblage or congeries of ideas, but rather an underlying insensible substance that is in some sense spread out under the sensible qualities of sensible things to which the object's sensible properties are all inextricably linked. The apple is red and sweet in the materialist conception because redness and sweetness are both sensible properties superimposed on the same underlying insensible material foundation. They are properties of the same thing, not merely because there is nothing more to say than that they are experienced in proximity. Seeing the color of the apple in a continuous series of experiences that is also found together in roughly the same space-time frame in which we experience the apple's taste and aroma, textures, and sounds, but because they all belong and are all attached as multimodal sensible qualities to one and the same underlying insensible material entity. It is the apple's insensible matter or material substratum that is metaphorically spread out underneath the apple's sensible properties. We must, for consistency's sake, speak of the material substratum of the apple as only metaphorically spread out beneath the apple's sensible properties. As an insensible entity, the material substratum of the apple is not distributed in time and space in the way that sensible things are literally described as spread out, such as a blanket or a layer of sandwich bread. The material substratum of nagutom ako. The material substratum of sensible things to which all sensible properties of the same sensible things are ascribed according to materialism is supposed to exist in space and time and presumably never occurs except as the foundation of all sensible qualities. It's not supposed to be experienced in space and time like other spatiotemporal entities. It is rather like Hylas's namesake in Aristotle's concept of prime matter, prote hyle, altogether lacking when considered in itself. In any individuating definition, species, secondary substance or form. It's also related for this reason to what contemporary metaphysicians sometimes speak of as bare particulars. A bare particular is similarly supposed to be an individuated thing that has no properties of its own, but to which sensible qualities attach. It is also never found by itself, but is assumed to provide an explanation of the identity and the individuation of sensible things. The concept of a sensible thing is understood on a variation of the materialist model as an individual mind-independent entity to which a particular set of ideas or sensible properties attach, rather than a mere congeries of mind-independent ideas. These, these is the concept of matter as the material substratum of sensible things that Hylas defends and Berkeley, through Philonous, clearly rejects. And that for me is very important that you understand, my brothers. You need to be able to see that strand of no, and why it's important to consider that strand. So if this is clear, please click next. If not, you know the drill. You have to so thank you very much for paying attention. I hope I was able to explain the material substratum, no? Something, it's a foundation, but it's a non-existing, non-penetrable foundation for everything. Uh, in the next recording, we'll look at Berkeley's congeries of ideas. Uh, okay. Let's end the recording. Lumalabas yung aking Facebook. Anyway.